I am your host, Varun Charya, and welcome to the show. So, yes, we're gonna do a quick live here. I've never done this before. This is a first for me. I'm trying to see how this works, but um, look, yeah, it's probably going to be a black screen. So let's keep it to audio only. I've been having technical issues. I was trying to do this right after the draft, and then I've been having a lot of technical issues with the app that I had used. So let's keep it to audio only today. So I wanted to do a video really to talk about live to really go into what's going on with the draft, like the two-way contracts that are being signed. I've been seeing from Shams right here, a lot of stuff is happening for me as a fan of the G League. For any of you who are G League fans, this is where things get really interesting. So let's just get straight to it. So Shams is saying first thing here, Arizona's Caleb Love, one of the most prolific scorers in college basketball, is expected to sign a two-way NBA contract with the Portland Trailblazers. Love went undrafted and now lands a deal with the Blazers roster for next season. So this is interesting because we right now know that the current two-way contract guys for Trailblazers is Bryce McGowens, CD Sissoko, and Justin Minaya. So that means that one of those three guys will not be on a two-way next year, and we'll like with all these tweets, we're gonna start to get an idea about maybe who or who may not be back. There's just something to really be monitoring here, and I think what's interesting is who doesn't come back. Well, my guess, if I had to guess somebody, I'm gonna go with Bryce McGowens. I think Justin Minaya probably spent more time, with Portland this past year. And then, maybe CD, CD is a guy who worked out for the Trailblazers in 2023, but then, they were interested in selecting him, but the Spurs ended up drafting him. And so, that was the situation at the time. Then they just end up signing CD after he gets traded from the Spurs to the Kings, who then the Kings then trade him to the Wizards, and then he gets cut by the Wizards, and then the Trailblazers sign him. And this only happens really in March. So maybe it's only been 2 to 3 months. Maybe they've seen everything they needed to see from CD, and so it's possible that maybe CD is the one, the odd man out here. But something to look at is with these guys who are on these two ways, where their deal is no longer like guaranteed. I think you have to monitor, what their situation is going to be like for next year, because it's very possible that any of these guys do decide to come back. Maybe on the summer league roster, they might still even play with that summer league team, despite the fact that they might not get a two-way contract or be on a two-way contract at the moment. So we'll look, like an example is Bryce McGowens last year. The Hornets decided not to give him, not to bring him back, and he still played summer league, and he ended up actually playing summer league. With the Hornets, but then the Trailblazers called him up midway during summer league, and so it's very possible we'll get an idea with this draft as we continue to keep moving forward. But things are with summer league moving forward. We'll continue to see what's going to be going on. So Caleb Love, I know he was a really good player. He's kind of gone between different areas in his career, in his college career, but I really like the idea of them continuing to look for more talent. With Hanson Young also being drafted, I think that's going to be a very interesting situation to monitor as well. Because you got Hanson Young, you got Caleb Love, and look, if any of these guys impress well enough, this summer league, this training camp, like maybe if they do great in the regular season, like maybe Caleb Love gets his two-way converted. The Trailblazers, they're clearly, with the Drew Holiday trade, they're clearly trying to make a splash now. They want to win. And I think they're looking for guys who can help them. And I think this was a great move, for Portland. So let's kind of get moving on. There's a lot of stuff we have to cover. So Louisville's Chucky Hepburn, the ACC Defensive Player of the Year, has agreed to a two-way contract with the Toronto Raptors. So we know the three two-way contract guys is Jared Roden, Aldridge Chomsky, and AJ Lawson. And so, look, that's interesting because I thought AJ Lawson is probably one of the better three-way, two-way, one of the better of the three two-way contract players that the Raptors had. I think if there's one guy who's probably out, I would maybe say Jared Roden is my guess. I think Ulrich Chomsky, he tore his ACL, so he didn't really get to finish the season like they were hoping. I remember I did watch their pre-draft presser earlier this week. They really were hoping that Chomsky was healthy. He was going to be part of that ends second half of the season with the Raptors, like the Toronto Raptors, not the Raptors 905. They were really hoping that would have worked out. So, they're waiting to see how summer goes for him, but I wouldn't be, I don't know. I don't know if the Raptors want to see how summer league goes, if they decide to keep him in the organization. I guess we'll kind of get an idea as summer league kind of, approaches his future. But, I like this idea of them bringing a defensive player of the year. It seems that Toronto's going this direction of they're trying to win. We saw what's going on in the East with all these injuries, and it feels like, if they're saying this whole thing about the East being wide open, maybe Toronto really is trying to win. I think Toronto, I'm really high on Colin Murray Boyles from South Carolina. I really like that pick for them in the lottery. And, I think they're looking for guys who could potentially help them right away. It feels like guys who maybe have the ability to help them compete. We'll see what they're going to do with RJ Barrett, but they still have Brandon Ingram for next year. So, some very interesting moves. I mean, they have Emmanuel Quickly. I've heard some rumors about maybe him getting traded, but and look, Jamal Shed, I thought was one of their really underrated draft picks from last year, and I thought he looked really good, especially after he came, back from his assignments with the Raptors 905. So yeah, let's see what happens with the Toronto Raptors. I'm gonna move on here to Villanova star Eric Dixon has agreed to a two-way NBA contract with the Los Angeles Lakers. Dixon was the number one scorer in college basketball last season, shooting 41% from three. Okay, I am going to look this guy up. I'm just going to say out loud, I have my iPad with me so I can kind of look at these stats. But that's interesting. So the Lakers currently on their two-way contracts. We know right now they have Christian Koloko, they have Trey Jemison. So the third, player was Jordan Goodwin, who got converted to a regular contract so he could play in the playoffs. I think I saw a report about this. I don't know how true it is, but something about the Lakers potentially wanting to keep both Koloko and Jemison going into this free agency. Obviously, things can change. Guys play really well during summer league, play really well during training camp. I mean, we saw that happen with Colin Castleton. Quincy Olivari was doing really good in training camp, and then they ended up deciding to move on from Castleton. So we will see what they decide to do. But I'm gonna look this guy up. So Eric Dixon here. I'm gonna look up his stats because I'm actually very curious if they're saying he was the leading scorer. Okay, so he played with the Wildcats. He's a 6'8". He's 6'8". Okay, so he's 265. Um, and then let's see, his 2024 to 25 year, he had averaged 23.3 points per game. Um, let's see. Just pulling up on the ESPN here. Those stats. Okay. So okay, but while it is loading, the stats are loading. Yeah, I think they had a two-way spot open, so this isn't a surprise. That they were gonna be able to go after somebody. I think what I've been noticing the Lakers have done the past two seasons is they typically sign guys for the first, it feels like the first part of the season to get their rights. And then like for example, like with Quincy, they were able to get his affiliate rights so he could return back to South Bay even after the season ended. I mean, after his like two-way contract ended, he was then able to return to South Bay, and so Yeah, I think that is something to kind of monitor the way they continue to approach this, because then they go after and get guys on these two-way contracts who, like these more experienced veteran players in the NBA. Like maybe you saw like Skylar Mays, Harry Giles, you saw Jordan Goodwin, Trey Jemison, like guys who weren't like necessarily in their first year, but who were kind of in their second year, going into the NBA. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Lakers decide to do that again this year. They're always going to be looking for guys who can potentially help the team. And so, like I said, wouldn't be shocked if they decide to do that. But okay, I've got sports reference here. I'm going to pull up um, Eric Dixon's stats. So he is a 5-year senior. He played the COVID, like he had another year due to COVID eligibility. But he had 23.3 points per game, 5.1 rebounds, 1.9 assists, 0.8 steals, 0.3 blocks, and he was shooting about 41% from three. The only thing I'm a little concerned looking at this is that he shot 48.3% from two, which I kind of imagine if you score a lot, he takes a lot of shots. So kind of reminds me a little bit how they went after Blake Henson last year in the summer. I mean, a guy who also was scoring a lot too. And, I don't know how true this is. They said something about Austin Reeves today declined an extension, and I don't know how true it's going to be, or if it's just right under he's declining it more to try to see what if they can give him more. I don't know. I also saw something about Dorian Finney-Smith potentially maybe declining his player option for free agency and testing unrestricted. So we'll see. But this is, I think, a great move for the Lakers. We saw they drafted another small forward in the second round too. So this South Bay Lakers team is going to look pretty cool for this year. Um, okay, so next guy we have here is Wake Forest. Hunter Salas has agreed to a two-way NBA contract with the Philadelphia 76ers. This is from Sean. So, okay, Hunter Salas, I believe when I looked him up earlier, he was a guard. So, okay, on the 76ers right now, you have Jeff Dowden, you have um, Jalen Hood-Schifino, and Alex Reese. So those are three guys. Now the thing you have to think about also is you have Ricky Council, which I imagine I don't know if his contract ends this summer, or if his, I mean, I imagine the way his contract probably is, I don't think it's guaranteed. It could be a similar situation with Justin Edwards. Like they have guys who, they have played this past 2 seasons with the Blue Coats, with the 76ers. So the question really is like with Hunter Salas, could he be like a Ricky Council with Justin Edwards who, ends up actually playing minutes with the 76ers? So we'll see like how much playing time. I mean, we saw they dropped to VJ Edgecombe. So there is a lot of, I think there's going to be a lot of things that the 76ers have to kind of focus on as a playoff team, trying to, like we are talking about, this wide open East, trying to make it to the finals. So I like this move. I think it makes me wonder, out of the three, who's not coming back. I believe Jeff Dowden, I think, still might have a year of two-way eligibility. So I mean, I think Nick Nurse likes him a lot. I mean, they've known each other from since he was in Toronto. This is, Jeff Dowden's second year this past season was with the 76ers. So I really wonder, like, is he going to be back? And so Jalen Hood-Schifino, I know he got some run, so maybe he, with the 76ers, maybe he gets a chance. Alex Reese got some run towards that, with all these injuries that happened to him in the second half. So we'll see. I think as Summer League rosters get announced, we'll find out who's going to be with this organization moving forward. Um, Next thing here we got is Alabama's Mark Sears, a first All American, has agreed to a two-way NBA deal with the Milwaukee Bucks. Okay, so Mark Sears, I looked him up. He's the point guard from Alabama, and so you have Jamari Bouye. you have Pete Nance, and you also have um, Staniel and Moody. Now, I think, look, it seems they have a point guard, they have a wing, they have a big man, kind of on each of those spots for these two ways. So I think Mark Sears, if I had to guess, I would wonder if he's replacing Jamari Bouye. Maybe they'll keep both of them. We'll find out as we go into summer league what's going to be happening. I mean, Jamari Bouye, he's been back and forth between the G League and the NBA, so I'm really wondering, like, is he going to play summer league again this year? If he's not with the Bucks, is he going to go overseas? So we'll see. Pete Nance, I thought Pete Nance also, kind of played for a couple of teams. I mean, he was with the Cleveland Charge, then, gets called up to the 76ers, and then they decide not to bring him back. So then he ends up going back to the Charge, then he gets called up to the Milwaukee Bucks on a two-way. So a lot of interesting things for the Bucks here. And so I really, yeah, I'm really curious what direction they're going to be going. I think, look, we have to look at Giannis here, right? So the situation is they want to win with Giannis still, like right now, despite the Damian Lillard injury. And I think you have to be looking at your two-way contract players, and I really think you have to find guys who can help this team this season. They're going to be really struggling, I think, especially at the point guard spot. And with Lillard's injury, this Mark Sears situation truly is honestly a smart move for the Bucks to go out and get a point guard. So I think this was the right move, honestly. If you're Milwaukee, and I don't know if how true this is. I think Shams was just saying this, that apparently Giannis is really monitoring the draft and what Milwaukee decided to do. So as we kind of move forward, we'll kind of get an idea what ends up happening. So next thing here is the Miami Heat have signed Vlad Golden, Michigan 7-footer, on a two-way contract. Now, look, I'm a Heat fan growing up, so I like this because I think it doesn't hurt to look for more center options. We have Khalil Ware. I'm happy about his development. He didn't play a lot with Sioux Falls, and I thought in the two games he did play, he looked great. And so I think sending a guy like Vlad Golden, who's going to be going to Sioux Falls, in Dakota, and is it North Dakota, I believe, or South Dakota, but he's going there, to play in his career. But it's cool that they're going to develop another, a big in the G League with the Skyforce. So, I'm excited. I was more interested too if they would have drafted another point guard. But we know they have Isaiah Stevens, they have Drew Smith, and they have Josh Christopher. But Josh Christopher is no longer two-way eligible, so I don't think he's gonna be back with the Heat. Really, honestly, at all. That's just my guess. But Isaiah Stevens, I don't know if it's true. I maybe read something, or there's a potential chance he's not going to be back on a two-way. So, you have a couple spots open. Drew Smith, I believe his qualifying offer for a two-way contract, which just so y'all know for context, each guy's restricted unless they sign a 2-year two-way contract deal. Most of these contracts are restricted free agency, where they will have the option to sign another two-way for another year, or the team can decide to let them go. And so I think that's going to be a situation maybe we'll see with Isaiah Stevens. But Drew Smith, they decided to give him another two-way offer because he's looked really good for Miami. He's probably been one of the great players that they've really scouted and done a good job with. It's really unfortunate he's been so injury prone the past 2-3 years, but I really like Drew Smith. He's a really great defensive player, I thought. He's really doesn't like to turn the ball over at all. He's admitted like he hates turning the ball over. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Real Madrid's Ali John Nadia, I'm I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, but has agreed to a two-way contract with the Atlanta Hawks. So okay, I do remember reading about him. He was a forward. He's about 21 from Real Madrid. He's a 6'8" forward. So you have Jacob Toppin, you have Daquan Plowden, and you have Keontae Wallace. So those are three guys on two ways currently. this makes me wonder, like, what is the situation with Nikola Dursic? Or, like, he was a draft and stash for the G League this year, playing with College Park because he had the injury last year, so he kind of wasn't able to sign a two way. I would imagine he's going to be back playing summer league, and is he going to be competing for a two way contract spot or a 15-man roster spot? Like we saw last year, like Karlo Matkovic joined the Birmingham squadron later in the season, and then he ends up having a great summer league, and they end up rostering him as a 15-man roster spot. So let's see what happens here. That is interesting. They decide to do that. We'll see if they move on from Jacob Toppin, Daquan Plowden. But I would imagine, I mean, Keontae Wallace was pretty good for them. I'd be really curious if they're gonna keep him. I would hope so because I thought he was great. Like if he ends up not coming back, I would really, if I'm an NBA team, I would go after Keontae Wallace. I thought he was great. So we're gonna move on here. Kansas 7 foot Kansas 7 footer Hunter Dickinson has agreed to a two-way NBA deal with the New Orleans Pelicans. So look, I'm gonna say anytime a new president comes in, it changes a lot of things. And it's not just the NBA; it's the G League too. Things do change. The way you monitor your two-way contract situations, the way you handle, the way you utilize your affiliate. I think I'm very curious how Joe Dumars is going to be utilizing the squadron this year. And look, we know they're drafting a lot of bigs here in this draft, and we know they've now they're signing another big. I think, look, they have Misi, they have Derek Queen, they have Carlo Matkovic, they have a center now, Hunter Dickinson. I think to my point is you also have a new president coming in that also very likely can mean the possibility that this that the situation changes of these centers, that one of these guys is no longer going to be part of the plans moving forward. So, we saw the Jazz draft like Walter Clayton Jr. So now it makes you wonder, like, is Keontae George, Isaiah Collier, could one of those guys be moved in the future? Because Austin Ainge wasn't there previously, and now he's coming in making his decisions on who he wants. So a lot of big decisions will be getting made. And so I'd be really curious. Is Matt Kovic going to be with the team? We know they made this Kelly Olynyk, Jordan Poole, CJ McCollum trade. So, they did lose a little bit of a big. I don't know too much about Hunter Dickinson. I don't know if he's a great shooter, so we'll see. But yeah, very interesting move by Dumars here. And so Auburn's Miles Kelly has agreed to a two-way NBA deal with the Dallas Mavericks. Okay, so this is interesting. So Miles Kelly, I'm gonna look him up because I'm actually kind of curious. So I'm curious if he plays defense, knowing Nico Harrison. But look, your two-way contract players was Kai Jones, Brandon Williams, and Kessler Edwards. And so that those were the people you pretty much had. I believe Brandon Williams, he was the one who got converted because of all the injuries, and they needed him for the playoffs more so than Kessler Edwards. And then Kai Jones comes in and as their center. I don't know if it's true or not. They've talked about potentially bringing him to a 15-man roster spot. I don't know if that's true or not. Because Kai Jones is no longer two-way eligible, so you can't sign another two-way. Brandon Williams, I'd be really curious to see if he gets his contract, or he is converted, but if he's going to continue to have a larger role because of this whole Kyrie injury with the Mavs. Like, is he going to be kind of what they have to focus on moving forward as a point guard? Because like Jason Kidd is praised Brandon Williams, and so I like Brandon Williams' game. So I'd be curious to see if he stays. And Kessler Edwards, this is where I think it gets interesting because it makes me wonder: is Edwards going to be back too? And so look, they have an open roster spots. So Miles Kelly here. Um, let's see. So stats wise, he's out of Auburn. So brought that team to the Final Four. He averaged 11.3 points per game, 1.1 assists, 3.7 rebounds, 0.4 blocks, one steal, while shooting 37.8% from three. So like maybe yeah. So maybe he has the potential to be a good guard. For the Texas Legends. The other thing too is they have the draft rights still to him, Melvin Ajinxa, who was a guy they drafted last year, potentially a 3-and-D guy type of guy. I'm curious to see if he's gonna be back to summer league with the Mavericks, and is he gonna be trying to compete for a two-way spot? Remember, these two-way contract spots are not guaranteed. So if any of these contracts, if these guys don't play super great or somebody else plays better in summer league, like they could very likely lose that spot. So just things to keep in mind as we continue to move forward. All right, so I'm gonna move on to the next thing here. Um, I'm continue to go back to Shams. I'm on Twitter right here. Okay, Shams is saying that St. John's star RJ Lewis Jr. has agreed to a two-way NBA contract with the Utah Jazz. Okay, I have heard of RJ Lewis Jr. Especially from the tournament and St. John's. I'm gonna try to pull up his stats here, but look, current two-way contract players, for the Jazz, we're looking at Elijah Harkless. We're looking at Micah Potter, who's no longer two-way eligible, and Oscar Shibwe. Micah Potter, so he's not going to be back with the Jazz next year. They've already reported that. Oscar Shibwe, I think he was helping with a team camp actually for kids that the Jazz were running the other day. So maybe he will still likely be back. Who knows? But um, look, I'm pulling up RJ Lewis's stats here. So okay, so he is a 6'7" guard. Uh, was coached by Rick Pitino. He was averaging 18.2 points per game, 7.2 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.4 steals, 0.6 blocks, while shooting 33.6% from three. So definitely like a guard, a wing type of guy here for the Jazz. I think this is interesting what they're doing here. I think they. It makes me wonder if Elijah Harkless is going to be back. It kind of seems like maybe they're going to give his spot away to RJ Lewis. But again, we don't know. Remember, this is Austin Ainge coming in. This is now a new president. So things are changing with the Jazz in that front office. So, yeah, we'll see. I think this is interesting. I like the idea of Walter Clayton Jr. and RJ Lewis playing together. I mean, these are guys who were on really great teams in college. So I'm excited about because I think in a way it looks like they're kind of targeting winners, like guys who were coached by really great programs who were really good in college. So this is a very a good situation. So I'm gonna go. I think is it Michael Scotto, is another reporter I've seen as well. Man, and just first of all, huge shout out to all these reporters who covered the draft. They're out late right now. I'm sure there's, I don't know if any of them are still up, but they're have to be at least like talking to, like, reporting this information. Because I'm sure, conversations are going on for Summer League, for Exhibit 10s for the fall, for, the G League. So, but yeah, let's kind of get back to it. So, okay, here's a very interesting thing. The Dallas Mavericks have agreed to a two-way contract with Ryan Nembhard, who is the younger brother of Andrew Nembhard. He was projected in the later part of the second round. This is interesting. I like this move actually a lot by the Mavs because now they have an open two-way spot. They have the two that we were talking about earlier. They need to find a point guard. And if this adds a little bit of competition between him and Brandon Williams about who can help kind of put some minutes behind this whole Kyrie injury, it's a great move. They said that Ryan Nembhard might have been one of the best passers in this draft. So that is very intriguing. And so I am excited about this move by the Mavs. And so the second thing here we got is Alabama forward Grant Nelson will be joining the Brooklyn Nets and compete for a two-way spot in training camp. League sources tell Hoops Hype. Nelson averaged 11.5 points, 7.6 rebounds, and 1.2 blocks for Alabama last season. So I have seen Grant Nelson play. I really do like his game. I thought he was really huge for them this past 2 to 3 years. for being successful. And so yeah, I really like this. I think the question right now with Brooklyn is what is going on with their draft picks? I know a lot of people are wondering why they made all of those draft picks that they did. It is interesting. I don't know if any of those guys can be on a two-way after in the second round. So that's like five spots for a two-way for a regular roster spot Brooklyn. But let's talk a little bit about the two-way contracts that they are on that the previous guys were on. So look, we got Reese Beekman, we got let's see, Tosan Ivovan. I might be mispronouncing his last name, but we got him, and then we got Tyson Etienne. And so look, these three two-way contract spots, we know that out of that, one of those guys is going to be gone. So the question is, who is it potentially going to be? Is it Reese Beekman? Is it Tyson? Um, I think that's a very interesting, I guess, question. But when you look at Grant Nelson, and look, they have a lot of draft picks that could be playing with the Long Island Nets, and you bring in Grant Nelson here, who could also stretch the floor. It makes things very interesting as we kind of go into this next season with the Long Island Nets. Um, but let's see. Like as we get closer to summer league, we'll see if Reese Beekman is still with the team. We'll see if Tyson Etienne is still with the team. I thought he looked really good with the Nets this year. So I think I would wonder as like a fan if he'd be back. We'll see. But next signing here we got from Michael Scotto is two-time SEC All Defensive Team selection Cam Matthews, Mississippi State, will join the Houston Rockets and will compete for a two-way spot in training camp. Okay, so current two-way contract spots is David Roddy, Nafali Dante, um, and nobody had another third two-way contract spot. But yeah, those are at least the two I know of off the top of my head. Oh, and Jack McVay. Those are the three. Okay. So I don't think, my personal opinion, I don't imagine Jack McVay being back. That's just a guess, but I don't, because he didn't play a lot with Houston. David Roddy was signed later in the season, and he's on a 2-year, two-way deal. So I wonder if he would get more of an opportunity given that he's on that 2-year, two-way deal. Um, but if look, Cam Matthews here is competing for a two-way spot with the Rockets in training camp. That means he'd be competing against David Roddy. And it could be for that open two-way spot also if Jack McVay is not back with the team next year. So, just some interesting things. Kind of look a little bit at with Houston. They lost some of their defense in like from Dylan Brooks with this whole Durant trade, and so it's cool to see that they're targeting a guy like Cam Matthews on a two-way here. Um, okay, so let's see. I'm gonna see if there's any other information I can find about other two-ways. I know I saw something else. I believe it's Tony Jones of the NBA Athletic. Let's see if I feel like he reported something. I remember seeing earlier. Let's see, it's RJ Lewis. Okay, Tamar Bates. Okay, so the Denver Nuggets are signing Tamar Bates from Missouri on a two-way contract. Okay, so I don't know too much about Tamar Bates, so I'm gonna read about him or like look up his stats. But let's talk about our two-way guys they have under contract. They have PJ Hall. They also had, let's see, their two ways. I'm actually Grand Rapids Gold real quick. Um, but yeah, they had PJ Hall. Um, they had Spencer Jones, and they didn't have. Or no, wait, yeah, I think he got caught. But yeah, I think the Grand Rapids Gold. Now do you have a third two-way contract player on their team, or on the Denver Nuggets? But let's see. Let's do a quick Google check again. PJ Hall. Oh, Trey Alexander. Okay, and Trey Alexander was the rookie of the year in the G League this year. Um, okay, so yeah, those three guys are their two-way contracts players. So, okay, so the question is, what are they getting, in a guy like Tamar Bates? So let me go back to looking at stats. I'm just curious because it kind of feels like